So hi and welcome to another episode of Ear to the Ground podcast. We've been asked to come together by Farming Connect. We're all new-ish entrants, some younger than others, but they thought it'd be really good if we came together and just had a conversation about why you're in the industry, what we love about it, what the challenges are for it all to come together, and just, I don't know, kind of hopefully we'll come up with a few little bits of interesting stuff for us, but hopefully that other people can take away from that as well. Yeah, so I'm Matt Swarbrick and I've got a little farm, Henbant, up between the mountains and the sea, up in northwest Wales. We farm a little bit of everything. So we grow vegetables, we've got an 80 share CSA veg box, we've got lots of agroforestry, hopefully with some fruit following behind it, and a beef herd, yeah, and some tourists as well.
Brilliant, yeah, I'm Peredur Owen. I farm sheep and beef in Llandovery. I've been there for about 4 years now, on a share farming agreement, so that's the first plug of how we got into the industry. Yeah, so we are farming a flock of sheep and growing cattle for, beef cattle. That's us.
Hi, I'm Ernie Richards. I'm from near Hay&Y. I'm a first generation shepherd working on an upland farm overlooking the Black Mountains. So we're about 1,000 odd foot up. We run a closed flock of 1,000 pedigree cleans. We produce about 350 yearlings annually for other sheep breeders and then prime lambs as well. And within my role, I look after sheep every day along with my boss. And at the moment, we're looking at what we do going forward. I'm a young entrant into the industry and he wants to take a step back. So it's that process of working together to move the business forward.
Yeah, and I'm Bryn Perry. I'm a first generation tenant farmer in Pembrokeshire. I'm in something slightly different in that I'm in sheep dairy. So I milk sheep and we also turn that milk into cheese, which I do myself as well. It's just, I'm the third year of tenancy now, so it's I've done a bit of learning and we're getting there eventually.
Nice. So are you from a farming family? Like we're all new entrants to it, but like, are you from a farming family originally?
I'm not a farming family at all. I grew up in the Cotswolds, so I was around farming and beyond lugging the old hay bale around in the summer and go maybe visiting a friend's farm. Wasn't actively involved in farming at all until much later in my life. I've been come up through the corporate world, I guess, a little bit until I was in 25, 26, and then decided that I wanted to get into farming. It's something that's been niggling away for a long time. I thought, let's give it a go, and I was lucky enough to be offered an opportunity on a dairy farm in Pembrokeshire, and it's all downhill from there.
Nice. What about the rest of you?
Well, I suppose even though I'm not off farm directly, my grandparents had a small holding, so that was always like an incentive to get into farming. And they're characters themselves, so I suppose that's where I sort of get my sort of, want to do things. So I'd be there at weekends and we, after school and everything. So I suppose I sort of linked the farming. Unlike you guys, I had no background whatsoever. So I understood the lingo and the different terms. Where some people come into the industry and there's so many phrases you come up against and you don't know what they mean. Because Brad, like you from a farming background.
Yeah, slightly different. I wouldn't really call myself a first generation farmer because we've been farming in the family for generations. But the way that I've started into farming has been on my own. So the family farm's still up and running. But we decided that I went into the meat processing industry after university, just as a bit of a secondary, just trying to enhance some extra knowledge. So then after that, I was working for Dunbeer, the meat processor, for 2 years, and then after that, getting to know people, we came across a share farming opportunity, which was an opportunity for me to express myself on my own 2 feet. And it's, although it's not technically first generation farmer, it's a real benefit actually of having a crack on your own rather than maybe being shackled to what we've always ever done in a family setting, perhaps. Yeah. So although we like to think that ourselves that we're all a little bit hard done by in any situation we like to be, but actually there's a lot of benefits that might come out of it, even if it's making your own mistakes and being allowed to make your own mistakes early enough in your career that actually you can make up for it and they're learnings rather than mistakes anyway.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable, isn't it? Like I well, I grew up desperate to be a farmer, but like my parents, they weren't a constant disappointment, but like I really wish they had been farmers, you know. And I was like, why can't you be farmers? And actually, like that, getting into farming from like just not having that that land base or that knowledge it's pretty challenging, isn't it? Actually, but now I'm so grateful actually that I came into farming not really having a clue what I'm doing, because actually it's not a blank canvas, is it? Like the farm and the landscape tell you so many things, but actually just having that to do completely what we decide to do. And me, like I came in as an ecologist, really. So I've got that ability to come in and kind of think with that kind of ecological kind of systems, thinking about how a farm works. And I think that's what's made it work for us. Is just having that kind of ability, just to go, what am I trying to achieve, and therefore how am I going to do it without any kind of preconceived kind of basis to it.
Definitely. Ironically, I'm driving up here today. I was listening to another podcast, an agricultural podcast, and there was two brothers, very, very renowned farming family from north of England, and what they were highlighting from a family farm point of view was that change was often forced upon them through financial difficulties, or whereas where we're coming from, there's no such thing as change because there's no preconceived conception as to how to do something in the first place. You're not changing anything because you're starting from afresh.
You're carving your own path.
Definitely. So it's just that freedom. The freedom's probably a little bit dangerous sometimes because you can make a lot of mistakes. But mistakes are fun as long as you know you've made them.
As long as you learn from them as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Because farmers are very much a closed book, aren't they, in themselves? Like they're sometimes very scared to say what they're doing, say where they went wrong. And Matt and Bryn both of you coming into the industry, complete blank pages. You've looking at things from a business and ecology side of things, and that is completely different outlook on farming. Whereas if you've been perhaps on a farm for a lot of years, you can get quite closed up and, well, we've done that for the years, that works, and then something comes along, maybe change it a little bit, but don't know. But different points of view, I think, is really interesting. And for me, I've had a mixture of both. Like, you went to university, I went to Aberystwyth University. So like you experience meeting new people through Farming Connect. You get to meet people like yourselves, and you think actually, there is opportunity there.
Yeah.
The crucial thing that Ernie just mentioned there is people, and I think it comes down to it that life is all about who you know. And some people find that a real negative thing, and they get really annoyed that sometimes I say it's about who you know, but my opinion is who you know gets you to that door of opportunity, but then what you know gets you through it. So I think it's not the be all and end all, but if you can pick up a phone to say, so-and-so, Bryn's given me your number, and that person hopefully respects Bryn, knows him. Doubtful. But as long as that person, he knows you, knows what you're about, and if you've hit the contact details, if you're the middleman, well, that is the first step on that ladder to gain trust.
You're already, aren't you?
It just helps. It definitely helps, especially coming into such a closed industry, perhaps, that if you can just have a little toe through that door initially, whether it's from Farming Connect or
even your neighbour, like
anything.
Certainly, from my perspective, getting into agriculture, I haven't got a huge amount of kit. I can't afford to have a huge amount of kit lying around for maybe 1 or 2 times a year that I use it, but just having a neighbour that's there to help you out, and and it might be that I met their old cowman or something like that. And said, I met so and so the other day and got chatting to him that way or something. But that relationship and knowing people and meeting people at events and other things makes a huge difference into where you direct things and how you can find paths along the way. The question I wanted to ask you all was, do you think there was a critical point that changed where you went, right, this is it, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to get myself into farming, or in your cases go alone or whatever,
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to plug Farming Connect again. It was when I was working for Dunbeer, actually, because working with a processor, you're working with retailers that are asking a lot of the way that their food are being produced. So I was lucky enough to go on the Mastergrass course, which was through Farming Connect, and that was run by James Daniel from Precision Grazing, and that to this day that is the thing that I always go back to, not necessarily that made me want to become an active farmer, but if I ever had the opportunity, I knew 100% that's the way the forage-based maximising off grass was the way that if I ever had the opportunity, which luckily I was fortunate to have that opportunity after, but that was the seed to go, right, if I ever do that, there is no other way that I think I should be farming in terms of even ecology and anything in terms of even financially. And just quickly on share farming, it's what I've managed, what it's helped me to achieve is the fact that share farming gives you a little bit of leeway where you can start actively farming without having a massive rent over your head massive ingoings over your head. You can learn while you're building your asset base, and I couldn't be doing it otherwise. There's no point even thinking that I could do it otherwise. Some people can, depending on backgrounds, but it's been make or break for ourselves, definitely.
What about you? Because you've come from very different world.
Yeah. Well, I just came because I kept on nearly dying doing what I was previously doing. So I was a filmmaker previously, and but I don't know, I'm not very good in an office, and I'd always wanted to be a farmer. But I started making films. I went off, and I fell in the sea in Antarctica and nearly died in a wave, and I got chased by polar bears loads of times, and I just got to this point where I was doing a really exciting job, but then every time I nearly died, I'd phone home on a satellite phone, and I'd have this massive I'd phone home for sympathy with my girlfriend. I'd be like, I nearly died, and she'd be like, yeah, but you nearly died, you idiot. I don't want to go out with someone who's going to die. And I was like, I know, but I need and so you end up having these arguments, £8 a minute on a Saturday. And I was like, it costs £8 a minute to have this argument. And anyway, so I thought that was enough of that. And also I really wanted to become more domesticated and just don't know, there's a side of that kind of maybe it's kind of really there. There's a kind of pastoral kind of rootedness, isn't there, of farming, which is just beautiful. And so actually it was like the opposite to that, spending all my life flying around the world, but it was still doing something that's really important. So to me, like farming is just the most important job in the world. I can't think of anything that's, that you could be luckier to do. And so I was kind of lucky in a way that I nearly died enough times that it really kind of hard flicked that switch.
Fall in the Arctic or...
Yeah, well, but it flicked that switch to go, actually, we've got to make this happen.
Yeah.
And that's just been, it's not always been easy, but my God, it's a game, isn't it? It's such, you feel really alive.
Well, dying.
Well, yeah. Well, you do though. Actually, there's nothing to make you feel alive, like swallowing a bit of seawater, and dropping below a big Arctic wave. But yeah, I feel as a live farming. I love it. Yeah. What about you?
Well, go on, Ernie.
Well, my story is completely different to that. I've never even been to Antarctica. But I think for me, I suppose, you're going back to say the humbleness of what agriculture and farming is that very much it's a lifestyle, isn't it? So I've got a young family like you, Bryn. It's quite nice to have that setting of bringing a family up on a farm. If you brought up on a farm, but it's nice, and I can see that feeling, and I think that's what I want to be like. It's just that fact that you got that space, and and COVID proved that for me.
Definitely.
The worst bit about it was people were saying, oh God, hasn't it changed? Well, actually it hasn't.
We're farmers.
Yeah,
it's great. I loved it. I know you probably shouldn't say that, but
actually a lot of what you've got to be thankful for living where we do. And so my story is a little bit quieter compared to yours, but I think wanting to be in agriculture, I think agriculture for me, being an active farmer like you've said, you've always got that experience, whether you choose to do another career or not within agriculture, having that practical experience, and whether or not it's through share farming, for example, you even put all your investment into it. So if you think, actually, I don't want to do this anymore, or do something else, you've got the opportunity. But it's getting that bad in saying it. You have to get that credibility within the industry to show yourself, because like you say, farmers are a closed book. Once you get that common interest with a farmer, whether you're talking about the weather, land prices, whatever, you've got them, I think, and you can get into that community.
Yeah, I'd say the common thing that especially you three guys have got is the fact that not being part of agriculture and farming from a young age has highlighted to you the benefits of that life. Whereas if you were immersed in it since day one, you think you might take it for granted, and you have everyone here making the active decision to going back into it is some sort of freedom that you've been allowed to make the decision to be back into it, rather than some people that might be expected to go back into it, and I'd have a real different mental effect on someone that, I guess I'm going to have to go home to farm because
nobody else wants to do it.
And I think that's another point or benefit of actually coming into farming, like you guys as a first generation farmer, I'd say.
When you decided to go out on your own, the picture that is now, is it the picture you imagined when you first got into it, or is it drastically different?
I just don't think you've got a clue, have you, when you start? You just got to go for it, and you there's no constant in farming. You always, the crucial thing is you've just got to roll with the punches and try, and I think that especially from a business side of work before, the crux of it is, whether it's whatever you do, is you have to be financially stable in a business. I was very fortunate through school, working on an array of different farms, whether that was dairy farms to sheep and beef, and that is a huge benefit for myself because you're working for different people, different ideas, and what that's led me to do is have a real focus, only because I've got no other option than making money, because you have to. And it's a case of the only thing really that decides which way we take our business in the share farming instance is whether it's going to be profitable or not. It does, as long as it's profitable, we're happy to do something, and then that's another crux of starting from, whether it's a first generation farmer, that you can make that decision from the start, and unless it's going to make money, you're not going to start it because it's not going to work. So it's very important that there's a financial viewpoint throughout the system, and I think that could lead on to learning more about your sheep dairy, Bryn, because it's completely different to what we're used to.
It is different, and it's intentionally different, I guess, because looking at it from maybe a slightly different perspective, in that, I didn't have a model or a routine that I came from, so it's very easy to go, well, that's how it was done when I grew up, so let's just take that model and we'll work on that. But because I didn't have that, I think it was nice to have a fresh canvas to look at and to look at what we can do. We've not got a map. We've got a 35-acre farm. It's not massive, so how can you make this 35 acres pay you back? It all comes down to the business decision at the end of the day, and maybe that's one advantage that I've got, is that I can look at it from that perspective a little bit more. Or I took that perspective and then worked out how I would make it fit the rest of it, which I'm still doing, but we're getting there. And so I guess that's the reason I chose sheep dairy. Is there there's still a very developing market. It's definitely an emerging market, and maybe it's nice to be on the curve and sort of at the front, but at the same time there's challenges that come with that, in that I at the moment milk the sheep, process the milk, make the cheese, sell the cheese, so I'm doing the whole process, which is intensive and very much hand to mouth at points, because you've got to do the whole stage, and it's not a case of somebody's going to guarantee to buy this animal off you at the end of the time, or it's like a contract rearing thing. You've got the full process to do, and you make mistakes, it's all on you as well, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing sometimes. So there's challenges in that respect, but I think there's a lot of interest around it at the moment, which is helpful. And Welsh Gov have started to sort of push sheep dairy. In the last round of grants, sheep dairy actually was mentioned, which is great, because it means they're thinking about it, and there's some good research going on, and some places are starting to really get involved in it. There's a lot of chat around it, so that's been handy. But it certainly has its challenges in doing what we're doing as well. And if you're the first one through it, then you're learning, you're making mistakes before anyone else. So by sharing what we're doing, it's been really helpful. So we have been part of like an agri-scot group that have helped basically communicate between each other. So hopefully some of us can share some mistakes before anybody else does them, and vice versa, learn from other people, and that's been really handy.
I think what might be quite interesting is if we could have just thought about it there in terms of challenges. You mentioned challenges there, whether we could come up with the main challenge that we had the first day maybe that we decided to go into agriculture, and what maybe that challenge has changed to now. So how challenges actually do change all the time, and it depends on your situation. Or even if we've got one main challenge that we think
of. What I thought the challenges were going to be weren't the challenges that ended up being the challenges, that's for sure. Well, do you want to start or?
Yeah, I can do. In terms of initial challenge, for me actually, be completely different spin on, because I'd been brought up on a family farm and worked on different farms. Actually, the challenge is trying to shake any preconceived ideas when you're being given an opportunity on somewhere new. And obviously, like anywhere new, you've got to learn the place. It takes years to learn the place. It's working with someone else, that it's their property, and it's knowing the balance of knowing it's someone else's property but having to farm it as if it's your own, because it's not going to work otherwise. So I'd say that was a challenge at the beginning, but like you mentioned, it probably hasn't been a challenge since, because all of that comes natural to you in order to make it a success. And then now going forward, I'd say to present day, the main challenge is definitely the work-life balance, in terms of you were so immersed in our project, because it is like a baby, it's new, it's very vulnerable, and we can't afford it not to fail. But sometimes you've just got to leave, and more than just a day away somewhere. It's a real balance, and obviously labour's not easy to come by anymore as well. That's another topic. But yeah, it's quite interesting how, like you rightly said, Bryn, is how what you thought the challenges may be and what they've actually developed to be 4 years in my case later.
I found some of those early days almost quite scary and quite big challenges, just in terms of because you can learn what you like, can't you? Like, you can learn so much off chatting to a neighbour, and you can learn so much off Google, you know. But actually, there are those moments. I found those early days lambing. I did some lambing course, and I'd help the neighbours a bit. But there's a moment when you're in there by yourself, and you're like this animal's life depends on me going, I've got this, and just going, right, I can do it. And actually, I think that's something that if you're born into it, you probably never really have that moment of going, okay, you know what I mean? And actually, so I feel like I've gone through that. I understood sheep. I've got rid of all the sheep because they kept in my trees. That was challenge 2. So they've gone anyway after that blinking giant hurdle. My gosh. And now I think the biggest challenge is probably that life-work balancing, and just that ambition to want to be really good at what we're doing, and want to provide a really resilient, really productive, profitable farm, and balancing that almost with the reason I became a farmer in the first place, which is that kind of that attraction to that romantic, I don't know, running around the fields with my kids, you know? And in my head, that's what that looked like. It didn't look like, try and steal iPhones back off my kids that are in the house and try and get them outside. And it's just working out that balance with it is the biggest thing for me, actually.
I think having a family now, that life work balance is completely different. You've got to work out, right, you've got to do the jobs you've got to do, and then at a weekend, right, we've got to go off and do something together as a family. Like you say, getting off the farm, we don't do it enough. And I always try and set a Sunday, especially, it's a family day for me. We do the work in the morning, go off somewhere. Doesn't matter what we do. If it's see family, if it's go for a drive, whatever, just get away, and then you spend time as well. But I think when I was younger then, even I was brought up around farming, for me, I had a lot of friends that were in farming. I always wanted to be like them, if that makes sense. They would talk, I do this at home, and I do that at home, and I do this, whatever. And I thought, I want to do that, and I want to be skilled enough to do that. They say they drive these tractors and do all this stuff and whatever, and I just want to do that. So I feel like I've achieved a lot of that because through Farm Connect courses or college, university, whatever you've ever done, I built up my skill base, and then from there you end up doing more things because you just want to learn. All I want to do is learn more and gain as much experience as possible, because I think gaining this experience, leads and opens places, And I've always, whenever I've worked in a few farms over the years, try and get this experience. And my thing is, I'll always ask. If I jump in a tractor and I've mowed a field before, but I'll say, right, just go for me once, so I know exactly what I'm doing. And then I make plenty of mistakes, but you've got to get that that confidence to go and do a job. Yes, things go wrong, but you've just got to sort of suck it up. Otherwise, you're not learning, are you? That's my thing. I was going to say, Bryn, I want to hear about your vodka, because you were saying you produce your cheese, but I think it's very, innovative way that you've used a waste product to make a good, tasty product.
Yeah. It's just, to me, it was more about a waste product or a byproduct being used again. I think if we can do more of that in agriculture, then we're all going to benefit. I've actually spent time looking at how we can continue to develop that even further now in terms of byproducts and ways of maybe harvesting the water out of the way before we use the way ourselves to then reuse back into processing. So, which is all very complicated and expensive, so we'll see how we get on. But I think that's a really important part we've got to look at moving forward, and talking about challenges in the industry. I think we've just got to get more efficient, and we're going to have to be more clever with what we do. If more clever is even a word. And just find a way to move forward and be efficient with everything we're doing. I think that's going to be critical to our operations. And having a profitable business that you can then leave and have a family life and do everything as well, isn't it? Like, it's not just...
So right now in your businesses, like what is like that kind of challenge of this year, right? So it's January, isn't it? We're all going into a fresh year farm. And have you got something that's like, this is what I'm going to nail for my farm this year, that's going to face, that's actually there to add that kind of, I don't know, response to those forthcoming challenges?
Yeah, for me at the moment, I've hit the capacity of my farm. So what do you do now? Do you stick at it and go, right, let's just make this model work? Realistically, the numbers that I'm milking 80 to 90 sheep, that's probably as many as I'll get on the land without using chemical inputs and things like that. I basically run an organic system without being certified. So without intensively going into, and I'm very much on the grass-based systems. I think I agree with you. I think it's a critical element of what I want to do, is just running a grass-based system, fairly low cost, and therefore hopefully we're not reliant on high outputs on the other end. But I think at the moment it's making that decision on how we move forward, and do we expand the business? Do we sit with it? Do we look at buying our own place, which is a huge hurdle at the moment, certainly for me in terms of where I'm sat. So at the moment, that's my big this year thing. Like, is what do we do? Or do we try and find some rented ground? But where we are, it's very difficult to get the ground or fight for it against these big dairy farms that want it for silage ground. So you can't blame them. They're up against their own issues with MBZs and everything else as well. So it all plays into it, doesn't it? But that's my critical issue at the moment.
What about you guys?
I think for where I work then, the impact of weather, I think, so the dry summer, we're experiencing a lot more drier weather in the summer now, and we don't really have 4 seasons, they sort of merge, summer, winter. And I think for us, it's all about trying to get more from less. I think farmers anyway want to do that. Farmers are quite cost effective people, but for us, like, we running 1,000 ewes. Well, do we look at reducing numbers a little bit and actually have better output without, increasing our inputs or trying to maintain our inputs? So I think what highlighted to us was maybe we got too many sheep at the moment, because the dry summers was like, we got to look at what we're doing. But how high health and welfare anyway, but high health is one thing I think we're concentrating on all the time anyway, but trying to keep sheep, as they're prone to being upside down and ending up in places and dying, we've got to make sure that they don't die as often as they do anyway. So that's for me, it's all about maintaining what you're doing, but also trying to get a little bit extra out of what you're doing as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like Ernie actually mentioned earlier, was wanting to do what someone else is doing, and maybe being steered by your own ego perhaps is something real hard to break away from. And that you've just mentioned it there again, is last year probably we were running far too many sheep just to have a number that you were quite confident in telling people how many you had, but it means nothing if it's making you less money than keeping less. So basically just repeating what Ernie's saying, is just maybe consolidating a little bit and getting far more out of what we've got currently, whether that's more growth, more lambs, more performance, better quality, and a better margin at the end of it, rather than chasing menial figures, whether that's U numbers or that actually means absolutely nothing for the performance of the business. And again, along with that, we've all mentioned it, it's just finding or producing a system that means that you can leave, because, and I think that's a big mentality thing as well, that everything happens when you're not, everything carries on when you're not there anyway. We're just so precious of it all that maybe a bit like trying not to be so much of a control freak where you don't want to leave because in case something goes wrong, but it's so important to leave. And even coming here today, talking to different people, well, it gives you a real buzz and it recharges you ready for tomorrow's disaster.
I wonder that sometimes. Like they say, don't they? Like the best fertiliser is like a farmer's shadow or whatever it is they say. Actually, I think the best fertiliser sometimes is farmer getting off the farm and like getting a little bit of breath. You know, and just that kind of bigger horizon sometimes.
You know, coming back to a little bit earlier, I guess, with looking at critical points and getting into it, I was very lucky and I went to the business boot camp through Farming Connect, and I came away from that and literally walked back in the house when I was working on a dairy farm, but we didn't have our own operation at the time, and just went, I'm gonna have a farm. I walked to the door and I went, I'm gonna have a farm, and that's it. And I don't know how we're gonna do it, but at some point in the next year we're gonna have a farm. And luckily enough, the stars aligned and the council farm came up as an option, and we were successful, you know, in that application. But I think it's doing those off-farm events, and I've continued to do that through Agri Academy, which I know a couple of you guys have also done, and other events and coming away like this. And it's been really handy for me because I've met people, chatted to people, and then you go home and you take that back and add it in, don't you? Like
Definitely.
It's really important.
Yeah, I'd say we've been quite realistic, but we have been concentrating on said challenges and different maybe things that are quite difficult within our situations, but maybe we should start looking at the real positives that we've actually discovered after the year, maybe a few difficult years initially. So I think we should have a crack at sharing what our main positives are from current situations, just to lighten the mood a bit.
I'm wondering with Matt, so you must deal with the public then quite a bit. So I'm interested to know, what do you think the public's perception is of farming currently, and also, like, going forward, do you think they're going to come closer to where the food's coming from?
I think they come close to where their food's coming from. I think that's inevitable. I think there is a point coming at which people connect with their food more and more. I think that also there'll be a bit of a point at which people put a little bit of a barrier between that. And I think so we deal with the public every day. Like there's the farm's just crawling in people, like. And which is brilliant because it means actually you can't hide anything and you shouldn't hide anything, and I think it's part of this thing of actually like almost that challenge to being a better farmer. It's a bit like keeping your house, if someone comes in your house every day for a cup of tea, like you keep your house a bit tidier, and if I was just single and no one ever came around, it would be an absolute state. And I think exactly the same thing applies to your farm. So actually having a farm that you can be like super proud of when people come around, actually in a way you start off thinking, well, is this all like fake and is it show? But actually I think fundamentally underneath that, it's a bit like when you take your car to like a really tidy car garage, they're just on it, and and it's like that. And I think the same applies to farm. I think having it tidy and having it looking good results actually in us being better farmers. Looking at bringing us closer to everybody understanding farming, you do the farmer time side of things as well. So how have you found that?
I think it's really good. Like we all be really brilliant. You portray a good image of farming, but also want to engage with the younger generations. And farmer time, it's pretty easy. I FaceTime a class of kids, 7 and 8 year olds, and they absolutely love it. That I show them, like I thought, I'm just a sheep farmer, they're not going to be finding me interesting, but showing them the dogs, what the sheep. I'd done like the shepherd's calendar type thing, so I showed them right from when the taps went in right through to lambing, and trying to engage in what happens. They absolutely love the fact that I lambed a ewe in front, recorded and showing that, and shearing, all these sort of things. But the one thing I always try put over is that a balanced diet is crucial, because they're our future consumers. They're the people that are the ones that are picking up our products on the shelves, wherever it may be in the future. And I look at it as you've got to try and get into younger audiences, trying and get them to appreciate what farmers do, if that makes sense, and try to promote careers in agriculture as well. A farmer like as well, you two, Matt, and been like, you're very good businessmen, so like your farmers got to be an accountant. Brad and I, you look after livestock. You've got to be a vet to a point. You've got to be an animal nutritionist. We all grow grass, so you're an agronomist. And we go machinery, where mechanics are like, there's a lot of careers in agriculture which you're trying to promote. It's not just that farmer with dirty hands on the farm with flat cap. We're a lot more than that, I think, and that's the image I try to get across and make the industry attractive for future generations.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that actually surprised me a little bit, is how many things you need to know to be a farmer. Like, it is, you need to... I remember someone talking about, somebody said to a farmer, and I can't remember where it was, on social media somewhere, they said, why don't you just go get a trade? And he goes, I've got a trade, in fact I've got 10, because this is, I'm a mechanic, I'm a vet, and it's amazing the skill set that you pick up and you learn, and it evolves with you as well, doesn't it? Like,
I think it makes you feel invincible sometimes. Like sometimes it makes you feel like knackered, you know? Like sometimes you're like, oh my God, what, I've got to do that and that. And we left the farm the other day, and we've got a few people who help out in the farm, and he phoned up and he's like, this isn't working. Like, what plumber do I phone? And I was like, no. Like, we are the plumber. We are everything. And it's like that. But I think it makes you feel like, actually, like I love it. This is what kids are good for. That's where they pay back. Is this like our kids are like our little Ezzy. She's like, you can do anything, and it's like, and it's so true, isn't it? In a way, like it does build you a toolbox of being able to do like almost anything, really. Yeah,
I think it's a crucial point looking at getting people into agriculture and encouraging it and
Definitely.
showing it as an option, because it doesn't, like, certainly it's not explored as very often in school as it to be. Certainly not from a farming background.
Like we talked about, you could state that farming requires 10 different trades, and it could seem a little bit daunting, but what farming also provides is so many tools and people to help you on your way that you actually in an instance where eventually you might be good at all those 10, but there's always someone better that you can call upon to do.
You don't have to know it all.
5 of the 10 perhaps, and that means if you can get someone else to do some of them, it means that you can get off farm more often. And yes, obviously when it's 9 o'clock at night and something's gone wrong, you have to turn your hand to it, or you've got to know a person you can ring to help you. But although it can sound daunting, it's funny in a crisis situation how fast you can sort something out when you really need to. Definitely.
But that's where Farming Connect has come in for me. You know, like all the things you listed, you know, there's opportunities doing Farming Connect to bring people together, advance your skills, you know, keeping up your CPD, all these different things which you've got to try and do. If you were working for a certain company, you would probably have a lot of these things, you know, as part of a package. Whereas, you know, when you're working for yourself, then you've got to go look for these opportunities, because if you don't, someone else will.
I think one of the biggest things of getting people into farming and the future of farming, like talking about that relationship with the public, is like, I don't know, like the reason I came into farming was partly for that kind of like nice little life, but was partly because I think it's such a potential point, isn't it, to make such a big change in the world. So like for our farm, we've got this like quite big context of going, like, okay, we can produce food, we can pay a mortgage, we can build soil, we can build biodiversity, we can build social capital, so we can bring people with us, and we can enjoy it, right? And if you can do that, like, you can do any, like, it's a really powerful thing to be able, and if you get other people to do that, that's really powerful on top. And I think if you can sell that message to people who aren't yet farmers, and to farmers who may be a little bit tired of it, going, look, you are in a position, and this is what excites me and frustrates me so much about like the kind of Welsh farming world, really, is like it's right on the edge of being like one of the most regenerative, beautiful farming systems in the world. You know, like we've got all this grass, we've got all this rain, we've got this space that can just be powerfully productive for all those different things. And it's just a little bit of working out how to add that little bit of pride, or that little bit of realising that by tweaking a few things you can make them amazing.
And the opportunity's there, isn't there?
No, exactly. And I think as young farmers coming into it, as new entrants coming into it, that potential's just so strong. And to me, getting that story to people of going, look, you can be a real powerful force for good through being a farmer. Is I agree.
And like there's a lot of women coming into agriculture now as well. You know, it's not just a profession for males or whatever, because you know, when I was at uni, there was probably a 70% lads, 30% girls. I think it's opposite now. I think there's a lot more females come into agriculture, a lot more opportunity. So I think it is open to everybody. You know, the agriculture is so diverse, isn't it? There's so many opportunities.
And what you two have proved really is that you don't actually have to own the land to make these things work. And I think that that old concept of owning the field, and I can see in a lot of ways it's a big benefit. But actually, I think that concept of thinking, well, I can't farm because I don't have land, and I can't actually, those opportunities in so many different ways, through Farming Connect, through whatever it is, are so big, aren't they?
It comes back to knowing people and keeping your ear to the ground, and if you don't take the opportunity, somebody else is. Like you say.
It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Definitely, and I can't remember who said it. It was some point somewhere where someone mentioned that every day's an interview, and in terms of wanting that opportunity, well, how you conduct yourself or attempt to be like daily, whether that's working for someone or someone sees you working for someone else. Well, as long as you're conducting yourself, even if it doesn't have to be within agriculture. If someone's seen you randomly doing something completely different, even if you're a school teacher and a parent comes in and sees the way you conduct yourself and it's brilliant, and actually you might want to change career and look into agriculture, well, or anything, it's all about how people perceive you and how that message is then passed on to someone else that could give you that opportunity that you've always aspired and wished for.
Opportunity's always there.
Definitely.